knew that I wouldn't. I feel good. I knew that I wouldn't.
AM 1220 KHTS, your hometown station. Prima Pediatrics Healthcare Hour on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. We're in studio with Dr. Feldman from Prima Pediatrics. You can go to primapediatrics.net for more information. And we wanted to talk on communication. You noticed a few things this week, so what was going on? How important is it? What's going on with communication?
Well, communication, of course, everybody understands is important, but I was struck by how important it was by several things that happened in the office. I had a patient come in accompanied by her mom, and it turns out the patient just had a mild respiratory infection, no big deal. But the mother told me that she'd been feeling kind of crummy and had gone to the doctor and had been sick the last few months, and that they told her there was something wrong with her heart. And I said, really, what is it? Because I, was curious and I wanted to be helpful. And she told me the story about how something had happened with her heart. She didn't know exactly what. She said the doctors couldn't figure it out, but it was something called cardiomyopathy. And they didn't know why it happened. And now she was having all kinds of troubles, and she couldn't understand why she was having the troubles and what it meant and how long. And now a doctor had talked to her about getting a defibrillator, which is pretty scary sounding.
Good grief.
So I kind of teased the whole thing out of her and figured it all out with her and explained to her what had actually gone on. And it turns out that about 2 weeks before she started having troubles, she'd had like a sore throat and a respiratory illness, which is, of course, why she brought her daughter in that time when she normally wouldn't, because with her it started with that. And 2 weeks later, she started having troubles breathing and so forth, and it turned out what had happened that a virus, the virus that she'd had, happened to be one of those rare viruses that attacks the heart.
Ooh.
But she didn't understand why it would attack the heart. And I said, well, when it attacks your respiratory tissues, you understand that it can make you feel sick that way? She said, yeah. I said, well, it can attack any organ. And I said, and when it gets the heart, in this situation, what happens is that the muscles of the heart get inflamed. I said, and she says, well, how does that work? And I stopped for a minute and thought, and I said, well, it's kind of like what's happened with you is you got a cramp in your muscle because it's sore. Now, it's sore because the virus got your muscle, but regardless, your muscle is real sore. And instead of resting it, you take it out and run a marathon. Oh, I said, what's going to happen? I said, you're not going to be able to walk for the next week because you've taken this sore muscle and run a marathon. I said, well, that's what happened to your heart. It got weak and inflamed because of that, but you continued to try to do what you were doing. I said, and so it's the equivalent of taking something that's sore and weak and running it on a marathon. I said, but you still had to pump your blood. Well, what happens is that then if it's really overworked like that, what do you think's going to happen? It's like when you have an old car and you race it, some of the portions of it are gonna die.
Yeah.
And then you're gonna have to get it fixed. And I said, so what happened is it got the muscles weak. And it's trying to pump like crazy. She says, because when I went in there, my heart was just racing. I said, sure it was. I said, because it didn't have enough power to pump that blood out. It's like your engine. You got an engine in a car, and it's gotten weak from age. And so you got to increase the rate, because if you don't have enough power to push the fluids on, you're going to have to increase how fast it's going. That's why your engine's racing, because it doesn't have enough power to push the gasoline through. And I said, and that's what happened to your heart. It didn't have enough power, so it started racing to try to keep up the same amount that was going out. But it still couldn't keep up. Then the more it did that, the sicker the cells got. A few more died off, and it got weaker. And then eventually, it just can't keep up no matter how much it races. And the fluid starts backing up. Well, the fluid all comes from, the fluid is your blood. It all comes from your lungs. So if you're backing it up, guess what happens? Your lungs get flooded. It's like flooding your engine.
Yeah.
He said, and then you're coughing and choking and so forth. And then eventually, the heart is just like a car. It's got the engine that pumps the gas around and makes everything move and forward. I said, but it won't work without an electrical starter, right? Well, what happened is the starter in your heart, which is your ignition thing that goes right along the muscles, kind of got weakened too because of the little cells around it started dying off. So it starts misfiring. When it misfires, that's just like your car. You try to start it and it doesn't start, and then finally it starts. Eventually you keep doing that, your starter wears out, and guess what? The car won't start. And that's exactly what was happening to your heart. That's why you need the pacemaker.
Yeah.
And the defibrillator, so that if it misfires, it'll get it back on rhythm again. Otherwise, if your car doesn't start, you go away.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then she understood exactly what had happened to her and to her heart and what it meant. Now, it turns out, she said, who do I see about this? So I gave her my recommendation. She says, that's the guy I just saw recently. And I have to know, I know this particular doctor extremely well. We've been personal friends and colleagues for over 30 years. He is one of the best heart doctors in the country, much less this city. And he's an amazing guy, and he has a wonderful bedside manner. But I think what may have happened is he talked doctorese.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Normally, he doesn't necessarily do that.
So a select group of people that went to med school for 7 years that know that language.
Right. And even so, doctors tend to forget that not everybody speaks doctorese.
Yeah.
I try to remind them of this by saying, listen, do you remember what it was like to read your internal medicine textbook the first day of medical school? You had to sit with the dictionary and look up every other word, and you didn't know what the heck they were talking about? How long did it take you to learn doctorese? Long time. It takes 2-3 years, even 4. I said, it's a foreign language. You may as well have been speaking Greek to her. And unless she spoke Greek, she wouldn't quite understand what the heck you're talking about.
Yeah.
So people have got to understand, well, doctors have got to understand that they got to speak people language. And you got to find a way to make it understood to the average guy on the road. There's no point, we make up all these ridiculous terms like, oh, I'm sorry, your child has otitis media. What is that? It's a big, long word. He has an ear infection. Why say otitis media? Why don't you just tell him he's got an infection in his ears?
Oh.
Don't use fancy terms with patients. Use everyday language. Explain things to patients the way they can understand it. The easiest way to tell somebody about their heart is to compare it to your car engine. Everybody pretty knows about car engines, They get that.
They get how they work, yeah. All right, so it's important for doctors to communicate well with their patients.
Absolutely, because then they will listen to you and do what you say because they understand why they have to.
Exactly. And so we're gonna switch gears and talk the other side of the ball. We're gonna take a break first. This is the Prima Pediatrics Healthcare Hour, talking communications between doctors and patients on AM 1220 KHTS.